Part 32. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 311. When treating penetrating injuries, what is the most dangerous moment? Gretel has simulated and deduced countless times in his past life and this life. The corollary is, the moment the penetration is pulled out, the skin, muscles, and even internal organs of the human body are all tense. When a penetrating object is inserted into the body, it will be firmly held by the tense body, and the action of pulling out itself will also cause damage to human tissues along the way. If you are unlucky, for example, if the penetrating object is a wooden stick with a nail, that nail may even cause additional damage, such as scratching an additional large blood vessel. Not to mention, when this stick, steel bar, or even a sharp knife is inserted into the body, it will temporarily block the blood vessels and damage it. Once it is pulled out, the blood will immediately surge. How to deal with it? Before pulling out, cut the skin, find the damaged blood vessel, and clamp the front end. But this kind of cutting and searching is itself a kind of injury, which will add more blows to the injured. Greet had seen surgery videos in his previous life. Some doctors tried to use a laparoscope to penetrate into the wound to find and seal damaged blood vessels. However, the diameter of the laparoscope itself was also a problem. Countless doctors have devoted themselves to this problem. And Gretel is now fortunate enough to make another attempt, a completely different one. The vines were stimulated, along the wound at the penetration, and squeezed into the gaps in the skin little by little. The diameter of the vine is not much thicker than a hair, which can minimize damage, and the flexibility of the plant during growth allows it to grow along the penetration until it reaches the exit of the other section. Then expand a little outward, pushing away the surrounding human tissue. The force of expansion replaces the penetrating object itself and seals the wounds of surrounding blood vessels and organs. After the penetrating object is no longer pressed by the body, the friction is reduced and it can be pulled out more smoothly. Brother Matthew, pull out. Gretel gave the order. Pastor Matthew held the end of the iron rod with one hand in front and the other behind him, and pulled it out with all his strength. The iron rod threw out a string of blood, which was shining brightly under the illumination spell, and almost hit Greet's face, while Pastor Matthew staggered, almost fell. "Why is it so easy to pull out?" he whispered. Beside him, the young priest of the Spring Temple, the two low-level priests who helped carry the stretcher, and the two apprentices brought in by Gretel all spoke in unison and began to cheer. "Pull it out! Pull it out!" The iron rod was pulled out and the injured did not bleed heavily. The treatment was half the battle won. The next treatment is no longer so dangerous. Cheers spread straight outside the operating room. Across the door, the families of the injured and the sailors on the ship who were waiting nervously began to whisper to each other and ask each other. "Pull it out. Did you really pull it out? Is our first mate still alive? Let me see my son, let me in dash." The door of the operating room was pushed open with a clang. Gretel closed his eyes, sighed, turned around and shouted. "Everyone get out. Don't push the door. If someone comes in through the door, I will treat you. Emma, it was a mistake not to bring Bernard with me today, and the operating room is too shallow." In the operating room of his previous life, the entire floor was a surgical floor. After entering, there is a long corridor, nurse station, item warehouse, medicine warehouse, restroom, dressing room, first hand, second hand, third hand, and fourth hand, all the way to the 11th and 12th operating rooms. Countless rooms are like a maze. Not to mention family members rushing into the operating room, even a young doctor who comes in for the first time can get lost. In the future, I will definitely build a surgery building. Well, when you reach level 13, you will have a mage mansion, and you will have a portable luxury hospital. You have to have dreams, and you have to live in reality. Gretel roared angrily to silence the door. He turned his head and looked at the two apprentices he led, and issued an order like a flowing stream. Lay the patient flat. Supine. Disinfect the area around the abdominal wound again. Hang up the shadowless lamp. The two apprentices were driven off their feet by him. And Gretel held a handful of vines in one hand, maintaining its growth momentum, closing his eyes slightly, and exhaled a long breath. The operation finally entered a rhythm he was familiar with. The patient is lying on his side, which is very uncomfortable for the surgeon. He has to squat half down, and if the arm is slightly lowered, it is easy to leave the sterile area, and the light is easily blocked. Although he had done that kind of surgery more than once, the physical exertion each time was more than 1.5 times that of the normal position. But now, the patient is lying on his back, with a bright shadowless lamp hanging above his head, and assistants standing around him. Everything is similar to the operating room in his previous life. The only thing that didn't look like it was the vine he held in his hand. "Brother Matthew, can you take over these vines and keep them as they are?" Gretel raised his head and asked. Pastor Matthew walked over quickly, tentatively put the green in his hand, and closed his eyes for a moment. "Can." Greet breathed a sigh of relief. The two people's eyes met, silently chanting 1, 2, 3, and nodded at the same time. Greet let go. Pastor Matthew passed through the power, and a green light flashed slightly on the vines, steady and still. "Your name is Andre?" Gretel leaned over and asked. The patient nodded slightly, and Greet lowered his voice as much as possible and said warmly, "The iron rod inserted into your body has been pulled out. Next, we have to see if there is any damage inside your body and repair it. Don't be nervous. I will try my best not to make you feel pain. You can sleep peacefully for a while. Sleep spell, activate." The patient's eyelids slowly drooped. Greet raced against time to take out the sterile drapes from the space bag, and spread them around the patient, leaving only the abdomen exposed. Alas, it is really troublesome to not have an anesthetist. In his previous life, the patient would have been anesthetized long ago, and someone would be watching his vital signs, so he would not have to worry about it at all. Greet sighed secretly, but his hands were not slow at all. Cut the skin, separate the fascia, open the abdominal cavity. 7 or 8 mage hands are constantly fluttering around, retractors, blunt separation, helping to clamp the blood vessels, Everything is well organized and there is no chaos at all. Under the snow-white shadowless lamp, the scene is half serious and half magical. Pastor Matthew stood opposite Gretel, holding a vine in one hand and raising the other in the air, ready to throw healing spells at Gretel's request. The young priest of the spring temple was pushed to the head of the injured, his face turned pale, and he covered his lips with one hand. It looks like he can spit it out anytime and anywhere. There is blood in the abdominal cavity. Can it be drained out? Gretel suddenly looked up at him. The young priest followed his instructions and looked toward his abdomen. His cheeks turned white again, and he bulged under his palms. That pitiful look made Greet really want to say to him, "If it doesn't work, just dodge, don't spit it out and contaminate the area." However, the young priest did not turn around. On the contrary, after struggling for a few times, he nodded firmly to Greet. His left hand still covered his mouth and he didn't dare to let go, but his right hand was raised into the air and changed several gestures in succession. With the movement of his fingertips, a line of blood rose into the air and fell into the copper basin held by the apprentice next to him. "This priest is very good." Greet smiled under the mask and gave him a thumbs up. He lowered his head and continued the operation. The colon was fine, the iron didn't pass. The small intestine is a little bruised. Let's treat the minor injury first and repair it first. As for the cleaning of the abdominal cavity, we can do it slowly later. There are 2 holes in the mesentery, this is not urgent. There were only 2 small ruptures in the superior mesenteric blood vessels, and one treatment was enough to treat the minor injuries. Really good luck. All the intestines were lifted up and pushed away, exposing the peritoneum of the posterior abdominal wall. Mage's hand, come on. Help me carry my intestines. What are you doing? If you cut and pull like this, the injured will wake up, the priest exclaimed in a low voice. Gretel didn't even raise his head. Shh. Don't talk. When you wake up, help me catch up on my sleep spell. He calculated silently in his mind and threw out another shot of delaying pain. The priest looked over to see the injured man, and saw that the man's brows were furrowed and his eyes were moving slightly, but he actually didn't wake up. He turned to Greet and said in surprise, "How did you do it?" "Delay the pain. If he doesn't feel pain, he won't wake up. There is a limitation of the sleep spell, that is, once the subject encounters damage, he will wake up immediately. But paired with delaying pain, it is a perfect match in surgery." Greet replied to the priest, and his expression suddenly became serious. The posterior abdominal wall under the peritoneum was bloody and fragmented. Gretel reluctantly fished it out, slightly lifted a broken kidney from it, and showed it to the other healers. "Brother Matthew, his right kidney, is already in this condition. Is there any way to save it?" In Gretel's opinion, there was no hope of salvation. A big hole penetrated the right kidney, and blood flowed out gurglingly. Not to mention, the body tissues have changed color and have clearly lost their activity. But kidneys are so important to the human body, and Greet always hopes that the treatment techniques in this world can give him different answers. Pastor Matthew looked troubled. He reluctantly released a healing spell, and a hazy green light fell on the kidneys without any movement. Then he poured a small bottle of the treasured healing potion. The pale golden potion flowed over the surface of the kidneys, showing no signs of improvement. The young priest from the spring temple also came to help, and he tried his best to use a healing spell, but he still didn't see any improvement. Obviously, healing techniques, especially those of low-level priests, do not have the power to reverse life and death. Gretel sighed helplessly. "It can't be saved. Let's cut it off." Incise the perirenal fascia. The kidneys are separated by the hands of a mage. Separate, cut, and magically heal the ureters and renal blood vessels. The right kidney was removed, and the perirenal fascia and lumbar dorsal fascia were healed using magic. These are all tasks of urology surgery, and Gretel is a little nervous about doing them, but fortunately, there is always a magical skill at the bottom. A broken kidney was carried off the operating table on a plate. He finally breathed a sigh of relief and felt that cold sweat had soaked his back. "Brother Matthew, it's okay. You can take back the vines, I'll clean out your abdominal cavity. It'll be fine soon." They said it was quickly done, but it actually took about half an hour. After Greet had repaired the latissimus dorsi, internal oblique muscles, subcutaneous tissue and skin, as well as the posterior wall peritoneum, mesentery and many other tissues in sequence, and washed the abdominal cavity with warm saline and holy water respectively, and was preparing to close the abdomen, there was a bang at the door of the operating room. With a sound, he was pushed away. "How is the injured? Is he still alive?" Greet stopped silently. He raised his hands flat in front of his chest, turned around and looked at the god of war bishop who rushed in fiercely. However, before he could see anything clearly, the other party turned into an after-image. He rushed to the bedside of the operating table and stretched out his hand to touch the injured person's breath. Fortunately, still alive. Great little theater. "Bishop Ares, are the injured still alive?" "Gretel, you're too late." "Ares Bishop, what? Already dead?" "Gretel, no, if you had come a little later, the injured person would have been able to wake up and get out of bed on his own. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, please ask for all kinds of. On the first day, I knocked over my cao yolu and scattered half of the soil. I quickly swept it up and put it back. Hope this thing survives. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 312. The bishop is truly worthy of having experienced many battles. He had truly experienced hundreds of battles, and he had broken more than 100 heads with war hammers, battle axes, and scepters. So even when he saw the injured person disemboweled and lying in front of him, the bishop did not change his expression and just said to Gretel, "Sorry, I'm late. How are you now?" As he spoke, he pointed to the door. The door of the operating room slammed shut, shutting out the patient's family members who wanted to rush in with him. Gretel straightened his upper body, raised his hands flat, rotated half a circle around his heels, and smiled gratefully at him. "The treatment is almost over, and we just need to close the abdomen. By the way, the injured should be waking up soon. Can you help with some magic skills?" The bishop expressed his unshirkable responsibility. The tranquility spell that comes standard in the temple of the god of war was released at once, a 3-in-1 method of analgesic, sedation, and confinement. The injured person immediately stood on the operating table, motionless. Greet was overjoyed and asked him to continue helping. This new bishop is also very patient. He closed the abdomen layer by layer and treated minor injuries one after another. He did not show any impatience, nor did he protest, "It won't be over until one big healing technique is done." After all the wounds were treated and the magic was released to revive the patient, he squatted down and looked at the pulled-out iron bar, stretched out his hand to measure it a few times, then quietly went over and asked Pastor Matthew, "So long? Is it penetrated? Where did it get inserted before? How did you treat such a serious injury?" Pastor Matthew: "Actually, I only know half of it. Still the smaller half. But this bishop was invited by him, and he came because of his face. He had to greet him no matter what." Pastor Matthew looked at Greet, who had already started to walk out with the copper basin in hand, and pointed slightly at the bishop. "He is in charge of the treatment. Let him explain it later." The Lord Bishop has already hurried out. Gretel moved forward, so did he. Gretel turned, and so did he. Gretel entered a room with the injured man and another old man, and he followed him in as a matter of course, and sat there, no matter what. "Get ready." Such a thick skin made Gretel look at him twice. He was almost like a bald bishop. However, others had reached out to help before, and he could not burn bridges now. He only smiled at the bishop and put the copper basin in his hand on the table. The treatment was successful. Your son's life is no longer in danger, but there are some follow-up issues that need attention. First of all, because the iron rod penetrated the kidney, we had to remove the kidney. Bishop Ares's ears immediately stood up. In the room, post-operative talks and popular science education were going on in an orderly manner. Outside the room, the noisy noise gradually quieted down. The crew looked at me and I looked at you, with tired looks on their faces. "Is the first mate okay?" "It should be fine. I can walk out on my own. My life should be saved." "Then can we go? Should we wait a moment?" The little priest asked us to wait for him to come out. While they were chatting, the door opened with a creak. Gretel came out briskly and said to the god of war bishop as he walked, "No problem, I will tell you how to treat this injury later. Just wait a moment while I take care of these lightly injured people first. You guys, come here and sit down." The sailors swarmed up, fighting for each other, and huddled together. A lame one-eyed dragon moved the slowest and was squeezed to the back. He suddenly extended his elbow and hit the elbow of the person next to him. "Who are you? I have never seen you. You are not from our ship, but you are here to rob me." James Lowe groaned secretly. He is a retainer of Baron Hops, or in other words, he is a shady assassin kept secretly by his family, who specializes in doing some things for the Baron behind the scenes. This time Gretel refused to apologize and gave a strong reply. The Baron sent him out in anger and wanted to assassinate Gretel for revenge. James Rowe received this task, one head and two big ones. It is easy to kill Gretel, but it is difficult to deal with the aftermath. Once someone is suspected, those magicians have countless ways to find the murderer. James regarded his life as very precious and would not throw it away casually no matter what. He could only follow patiently, hoping to find an opportunity to make the assassination an accidental death. Nay, he followed him for several days. As long as Gretel left the Mage Tower, the barbarian warrior would never leave. Every day at noon, he is sent to the treatment center, and he is taken back to the Mage Tower from the treatment center in the evening. James Rowe himself is only a 7th-level assassin. It is beyond his ability to kill people under the protection of barbarians without being noticed. There was a 5th-level priest in the treatment center. He wanted to pretend it was an accident, but he couldn't do it either. Finally, a large group of wounded people came to the treatment center today. James was cruel, fell hard, and walked in with his bloody calf. Originally, he wanted to wait until Greet was alone and kill him before leaving. Who knew, but before he found the chance, he was suspected by the sailors. He shrank back awkwardly and stretched out a calf. I am moving goods on the dock. I was injured just now. The priest asked me to wait for him to come out. The calf was wrapped in a large piece of gauze. The one-eyed dragon glanced over and snorted. Why don't you seek treatment from a priest for this little injury? Can loan sharks kill you? Judging from your delicate skin and tender flesh, you must have just gone bankrupt and can't do the heavy work of carrying goods, right? James Rowe was all smiles and chirping. The one-eyed dragon flicked it casually. Go to the back. Don't even try to get in front of me. James lowered his head and retreated to the end. At the front of the team, Greet had already spread out a book and began to ask questions one by one and record them line by line. Your name is, Femi, you are 18 years old, you have a broken leg. I took a look and found out, it's a simple fracture of the tibia. You have already been splinted. Do not exercise strenuously or exert force. If the pain is severe in a few days, or the swelling is very severe, remember to come to the treatment center to find me. Your name is, Bata, you are 23 years old. You have a large soft tissue contusion on your shoulder and a strained ligament in your waist. There is no big problem with you. Go back and have a good rest. You have large abrasions on your back, arms, and legs. Perform debridement, and wrap them with gauze. Do not touch the water until the wounds have scabbed. If you have a fever within 2 or 3 days, or if the wounds are large, red, swollen, and ulcerated, come to the treatment center to see me. Think of ways to. He asked the names one by one, described the injuries, gave instructions, and answered the sailors' questions. The speed is not fast, but it is definitely not slow either. One can be processed in 7 or 8 minutes. James Rowe was at the end of the queue. Seeing that it would be his turn in half an hour, he couldn't help but feel anxious. Is half an hour enough for the God of War bishop to leave? Should I look for a chance to walk away for a while? After being sent away by him after reading it, it would be inconvenient to find a reason to come back. After taking a look, the God of War bishop was sitting next to him happily, showing no sign of impatience. James Rowe struggled for a moment, then bypassed the team and walked towards Gretel. When he was about to get close, he suddenly tripped and fell down. Oops! He exclaimed in a low voice. Between the fingers that were pointing towards the ground, a poisonous needle had quietly popped out, just waiting to be thrown out. The medicine on the poisonous needle is his secret recipe. As long as the skin breaks and bleeds, the poison will be irreversible after an hour. The best part was that the needle prick made little noise, just like being bitten by a mosquito. He definitely had time to run away. As soon as his body fell halfway, his open hands were pressed in the air, unable to hold him down any longer. Immediately afterwards, a pair of translucent mage grasped his arms with one hand and straightened his body. Gretel glanced over in his busy schedule. "Are you okay?" With a command of his hand, the floating disc and the mage's hand dissipated together. James stood there stunned for a moment and thanked him repeatedly. He returned to his original position, stayed quietly for a while, then went to find a cup, poured water into it and held it to Gretel's hand. "This little pastor's mouth is dry when he talks. Give him a glass of water and he will definitely drink it." He held the water glass and moved forward step by step. He raised his left hand several times, wanting to tap his nails on the edge of the cup, but silently put it down several times. In the end, the exact same glass of water was delivered to Greet's table. "Master Priest, please have a drink of water." "Well, thank you." Gretel raised his head and thanked her, but did not touch the glass. Instead, the god of war bishop next to him glanced over and flicked a faint light. "There is no poison in the water. You can drink it." James retreated silently, dripping with cold sweat. He walked forward step by step in the queue until Gretel asked him about his situation, finished writing his medical records, and sent him away before he hurriedly left. Walking out of the room, he leaned his back against the wall and listened. "Your son, it's best to rest in the guest room for a night. After all, he is so seriously injured. Don't worry, I will watch it personally." James thought for a moment, walked around to the side of the treatment center, and quietly jumped inside. Just now, when a group of people were crowded around, he had already felt around and roughly knew where the guest room was. At this moment, he took a preemptive strike and climbed into the guest room, quietly hiding on the beam, concentrating his breath, and huddled into a ball. After a while, the injured person's father, Gretel, and the Bishop of War came in one after another. James huddled tighter on the beam, listening to Gretel putting the injured to sleep, and then walked to the next door with Bishop Ares, spreading out paper and pen. "I'm starting to make up for the disease. You want to know how this injury was treated? You can understand it later by looking at the records. Well, you want to watch me write on the side. Okay. Patient's name, Andre Miller, male, 27 years old, first officer. Penetrating injury, 16 mm diameter iron rod, inserted from the 11th intercostal space on the right back and penetrated above the pubic symphysis. Visual blood loss was 500 ml. Pubic symphysis? It's the bone on the hip. What is a midline incision? It is the midpoint from the xiphoid process to the navel, then, from here to here. The long recording and explanation lasted for most of the night. James Rowe huddled on the beam, listening to Gretel constantly explaining the contents of the record to the bishop. He went in to see the patient every 2 hours, his eyes were blank and he doubted life. So what did I do here? After listening to him write so many records, I feel like I can write it myself. Great little theater. Barony receptionist, Mr. James, did you kill that little mage? James Lowe, no. Receptionist, so what have you gained in the past few days? James Lowe, dead eyes. I learned how to write medical records. 3,000 words. Another update completed. I only owe 2, meow 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 meow. 5 unique skills bounce tickets. There are so many things in life that only take one step. Don't be afraid of troubles and evil, why be afraid of being busy? But I still have to work hard to update, I can't skip the vote. Even though I came back from exercising, when I first saw that 9 collections had been dropped, I felt nauseous, dizzy, and felt like vomiting. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 313. James Lowe lay on the rafters all night and never found a chance to take action. The little mage or the little priest. I wrote most of the night, and Pastor Aries stayed with me for most of the night. After writing the medical records, he went in again and again to check the injured person's breathing, whether his heartbeat was fast, whether he was strong, whether he had fever, whether he had urinated, and recorded all this information in his notebook. And during this process, the God of War Bishop, James judged from his robe that he should be at level 7, not only did not feel annoyed, he did not even go next door to take a nap. You have a lot to remember. Bishop Aries flipped through his notebook with emotion. The name, age, injuries, and various treatments were recorded on 3 pages, and 3 pictures were also included. The picture cannot be said to be accurate, but it is obvious that one can see where the iron bar has passed through and how damaged the body is. That's not the case. Greet smiled weakly at him. This is just the operation record part, or rather, just the operation part of the operation record. Such as the inventory of dressings and instruments after the operation, no dressings, no instruments, all done by healing skills and the hands of the mage. Submit the test results. Samples were taken from the abdominal cavity before the abdomen was closed, and no bacterial culture was done yet. Greet was also curious whether there would be tetanus bacilli after cleaning with holy water. The patient's tolerance during the operation, blood transfusion volume, intraoperative medication, special treatment, and rescue conditions were not written, only the intraoperative blood loss was estimated. The anesthesia situation during the operation, no anesthetics were used, only magical anesthesia. The anesthesia effect was satisfactory. None of these essential parts of the surgical record are available yet. Not to mention the first course of illness records, superior doctors' ward rounds records, rescue records. Thinking of these things, Gretel was as big as 2. When they were studying diagnostics, the teacher encouraged them, in Union Medical College Hospital, medical records from 100 years ago are still preserved for doctors to read and study. If we want to become a top doctor, we must start from writing. Start with a medical record that will still stand up to inspection 100 years later. It made everyone's blood boil. However, such ambitions quickly turned into this. After entering the clinic, working from 8 a.m. to 9 p.m., and dragging my broken body to make up for the disease. Write a medical record that complies with medical standards. Write a medical record that can withstand inspection by the province, city, and hospital. A medical record that will not deduct money from the medical record room. A medical record that can be litigated in a medical dispute when the time comes. Medical records that can win. Ahem, the past is too vivid to look back on. Miraculously, after traveling to another world, Greet began to work conscientiously again, filling out medical records one by one, even more diligently than working in the back of the medical record room. That is the ladder of medical advancement and the basis for judging whether every new diagnosis and treatment method is effective. How could we not write about it? Of course, he is diligent, but Mr. Assassin wants to die more. After curling up on the rafters until the next morning, watching Gretel yawning and being sent out by the God of War Bishop, and completing the handover work with Bernard, James Lowe turned over, jumped out of the window, and went straight to Hoffman Barony. No more assassinations. I will never do this crappy mission again. A failure once means a bad opportunity, a second failure may be due to negligence, and a third failure may be a warning from the gods. Relying on this principle, James lived to the age of 40 safely, and this time was certainly no exception. As an assassin, he has special skills, and he got back home without anyone noticing. By the time Baron Hoffman came to his senses and found that there were a few people missing from the castle, James Lowe had already taken his family hundreds of miles away and boarded a ship bound for the New World. Well, the safety of the Parliament's alchemy ship is still guaranteed, just Xiaogui. So, Is that little magician still alive? Baron Hauptmann's face was gloomy. After discovering that the assassin's family was missing, he contacted the informant in Nevis and found out that James was not afraid of being handed over to him after completing the mission, so he took his family and ran away to avoid disaster. He simply gave up on the mission and ran away. I'm afraid this little magician won't be able to move in the short term. He exhaled heavily and said to his wife. It's still very troublesome to hire a killer from the outside, and the credibility is also a problem. We need to slowly look for opportunities. Besides, James' sudden disappearance may also attract the attention of interested people. We'd better wait for a while before taking action. How long is a period of time? The Baroness raised her red eyes to her husband. From the moment she received her eldest son's body until he was buried, she never shed tears. That was her eldest son, the child she had worked so hard to give birth to, and the child she loved the most and was the most promising. Even if she died in the hands of a strong man, if she died in the hands of a commoner little mage, she wouldn't be allowed to take revenge. Her little Clay, her poor eldest son, if not her, who else could she count on? Counting on his frail brother who is out of breath after taking only 2 steps? Or the younger brother who was sent to the temple to become a priest? If she doesn't avenge her children, who else will? It depends on the situation. See if anyone outside suspects us, and if there is any rumors against us. The Baron was sweating. This lady is the beloved daughter of the old Viscount next door. She brought a knight into the castle to marry her, and she has dominated him ever since she got married. Not to mention, there are some connections behind Madame that even he is afraid of. How long was that? 1 year, at most 1 year, give me 1 year, and I can hire people from all over the mainland. 1 year. It's been a long year. 365 long days and nights. The Baroness thought numbly. Her little Clay would have to lie in the ground for a year, his coffin rotting, his body rotting, being bitten by maggots burrowing in and out, so painful, yet his murderer could not go down and accompany him. Make him wait for a year. 1 year is too long. 1 month at most, she replied sullenly. Her voice was ethereal, and her red eyes flickered faintly, like a will-o'-the-wisp. In 1 month, even if we can't kill him, we will destroy him. Isn't that little mage the head of the Department of Public Health? Isn't he working on that infectious disease hospital? Ruined what he wanted to do and ruined his reputation. Get out of Nevis. As long as he gets out of Nevis, will those great magicians still support him? Will you continue to follow him? At that time, if you create an accident, you can kill a 3rd-level mage. But this. Baron Hauptmann was sweating on his forehead. The Baroness balled up her black gauze gloves and stood up slowly. If you can't do it, I'll do it. If you can't find anyone, I'll find someone. The hem of the black mourning dress dragged silently across the ground. Like a black cloud, and like the tail feathers of a crow flying across the sky. She returned to her study, spread out her pen and paper, and began to write. Dear sister. The Baroness has more than one sister. Some married knights or squires, some dedicated themselves in temples, some often came to talk to her, flatter her, and get some benefits from her, and some broke off diplomatic relations with her as soon as they got married. However, the sister she turned to for help at this time took an unconventional path and devoted herself to the Black Crow Swamp since she was a teenager. Slimane untied the letter from the crow's leg and glanced at it. Still crying, still asking for help, this was already the 5th letter. She thought, her sister seemed to be really full of hatred, and she must take revenge on the little mage. So, just do her this favor? A sinister smile appeared on Slimane's ugly face, causing the apprentice to take a few steps back instinctively. She had been ugly since she was a child, and she had been bullied by her at home. Even the head maid and the cook dared to look down on her. Fortunately, this sister has always been kind to her, so she can have enough food and clothing, and also have the opportunity to learn to read like her sister. Because of his literacy, he had the opportunity to meet a magician from Black Crow Swamp and embark on the path of learning magic. After she left school, she lived alone in the mountains and rarely went out to meet people. She had not seen her sister, who was married to a baroness, for more than 10 years, but she always missed her friendship. Slimane thought for a moment, took out the first few letters from the desk drawer, and read them carefully line by line. This time, she discovered something that she had not noticed before. As she read, she suddenly burst out laughing. Ha 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 ha, Lin. Lin. You actually became someone else's follower. You followed a third-level mage. With his fingers, which were wrinkled by the potion, he squeezed the thick parchment into a ball. Thinking of Lin En, Slimane felt a surge of anger in her heart. She had been stuck before the level 5 level for many years, and wanted to sign a magic pet to help her pass the level. She went through a lot of hardships and asked her mentor to help find it. Later, the instructor found a cat-shaped demon pet and teamed up with friends to capture it. He originally wanted to give it to her, but the school decided to assign it to Lin En. At that time, Lin En was just a third-level mage. He has no shortage of magic pets. There's no such thing as being stuck and unable to advance. But because his mentor was strong and his group was relatively powerful, the demon pet that should have fallen into her hands was snatched away by Lin En, who was lower than her in level. This revenge must be avenged one day. She walked out of the mage tower, raised her palms upward, and let the crow in her palm flap its wings and take off. Half a day later, the Baroness received a reply. Dear sister. A carriage brought Master Slimane from the mountains to the barony, and then to the city of Nevis. Within a week, Master Slimane traveled up and down, visiting 5 or 6 friends in the school, as well as some nobles who were familiar with the Baroness. Then, she returned to the mage tower in the mountains as if nothing had happened. 2 weeks later, Gretel received news from the treatment center and the temple at the same time. There are several blocks in the city, where mainly small craftsmen, shop assistants, and the like whose income is in the middle and lower classes live. The number of patients has increased significantly in the areas where they live. The conditions are quite similar. Master Slimane, the hatred of the cat snatcher is irreconcilable. Thanks to Athos Yaoying for providing the character design of Master Slimane. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews. Asking for various. The new will not come and the old will not go. Well, one of my pothos plants died. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Giolan 2020. Chapter 314. 3 patients were found at 37 Glaston Street. 4 cases were found at 25 Cameron Street. They belong to 3 families. 2 cases found at 37 Alama Street. The news is summarized one by one to the infectious disease hospital. On the large map in front of Gretel, toy figures as tall as a finger were placed one by one, and they quickly gathered into a small cluster. Most of them fall into an area intentionally marked yellow. Gretel frowned and couldn't let go. He was deeply impressed by this area, which spanned 2 entire blocks in a low to middle income area. The 12 buildings are all properties of the same nobleman, and this nobleman is responsible for the piped water supply. Water supply for the entire city of Nevis, with the exception of the garden area, is provided by a centralized water supply facility maintained by the Temple of the Springs. There is only one exception to this, which is the original private water company, and among the areas that the private water company is responsible for, the largest area is the 12 buildings of the nobleman. Greet clenched his fist tightly. He knew it, he knew it. If this hidden danger is placed in the city, it will explode sooner or later. The question now is, what disease is causing this outbreak? Contact the Emergency Management Department. Block these 2 blocks, Greet issued a series of orders. All patients, everyone who lives in the patient's home, bring them to the infectious disease hospital. Go to the Black Crow Swamp for 4 people, all the patient's residences, drinking water, food, clothing, toilets, and conduct environmental sampling. Temple of the God of War, Goddess of Spring Water Temple, send 1 person each to your temple, and try to invite as many healers as possible to come and help. Mrs. Bellin turned the tap. The water is a little yellow and very small. She muttered, "These are damned," deftly picked up a copper pot to catch the water, and began to prepare dinner. "Little Avery found a job yesterday, and I want to give him something good to eat. Tommy did well in the exam yesterday, and he should be rewarded. He will graduate from general school next year, and hopes to find a job like a clerk. Should little Lila be sent to school next year? Well, it depends on how much salary her 2 brothers can get. If the salary is high, little Lila can be sent to learn how to read, and the family can move to the same neighborhood where they originally lived. There is no need to be like now, with 2.5 young men, a little girl, and herself, 4 people crowded into a room. Mom, Mom," the 5 or 6-year-old girl came over and pulled the hem of her skirt with a pout. Mrs. Bellin turned back and touched her daughter's hair. "Little Lila, what's the matter?" "Mom, I have to go to the bathroom." Go, and come back quickly," Mrs. Bellin ordered. Listening to her daughter running out of the room, Mrs. Bellin suddenly became sad, pulled up her apron and wiped the corners of her eyes. "Old man, I wish you were alive. This girl is already 6 years old, and she still has to go to the public toilet in the corridor. There is not even a washroom at home." She put down her apron and went back to her work. "Vegetables need to be washed and shredded, salted fish should be cut into a large piece and divided into 3 small pieces, 2 larger and 1 smaller, wash a few potatoes to prepare potato soup, and stew a pot of oatmeal porridge." The middle-aged widow worked quickly. After sorting out the ingredients for dinner, she suddenly felt something was wrong. "Why hasn't my daughter come back yet? It was just to use the toilet, why did it take so long? Little Lila is usually very well behaved. When she goes out to play, she is always told first." While he was hesitating, heavy footsteps rushed up the stairs. Mrs. Bellin opened the door and saw a group of men in black running through the corridor. Mrs. Bellin was so frightened that she quickly closed the door, and a little worried, she quietly pushed the door open a crack and stood aside to watch. The group of people rushed straight to the end of the corridor, and their footsteps turned as if they were entering a public washroom. After a while, they all left together. Mrs. Bellin glanced at the crack of the door and saw one of them holding a little girl with auburn hair and limbs hanging down softly. It seemed to be her daughter. "Little Lila." Mrs. Bellin was startled and immediately opened the door and rushed out. Before she even touched her daughter, one of the men in black reached out to hold her back and shouted, "Your daughter?" "Yes." "You live here? How many people are there in your family? Where are the others?" "There are 2 other sons, Eli is working and Tommy is in general school." "Address?" As he spoke, he pointed his right hand, and a little light flashed on his fingertips, which shone on Mrs. Bellinder's face. Mrs. Bellin was in a trance, and for some reason she vaguely gave the address. The leading man in black waved his hand. "Take it away. Go to her house to take samples. You 2, go your own way and bring her son." Immediately, 2 men in black pushed her aside and rushed into the door. Mrs. Bellin was shocked. Sir, I want to beg, but I don't know what happened to my family, and I can't even ask for mercy." Feeling anxious and scared, my stomach suddenly felt cramping, and I squatted down holding my lower abdomen. "Don't be afraid." When she was extremely frightened, a young man suddenly came out from the crowd and reached out to support her. The young man bent slightly and spoke softly. "A plague has broken out in this building, and your daughter is also sick. We are about to send her to a specialized hospital. You and your 2 sons may also be infected together, judging from how you are not doing well now. According to the latest regulations promulgated by the Department of Public Health, it is best to go and observe together. He helped Mrs. Belander downstairs with the tow frame and put her into the carriage. There were 7 or 8 people crammed into the small carriage, all of them were sick, clutching their stomachs and moaning in pain. Mrs. Berland hugged her daughter and just felt a little relieved when she jumped up from her seat. My oatmeal? The stove's still on. Go and deal with it personally. The carriage went further and further into the distance. The location of the infectious disease hospital is near Greet's Mage Tower, less than 1 kilometer away. Mrs. Belland got off the carriage with her daughter in her arms, and saw the doorway of the building in front of her, which was already busy. Quick, quick, quick. Quick, quick, quick. This is going to die. Stretcher, stretcher. Where is the priest? Another car is coming? The 2nd floor is already full. Send it to the 3rd floor. But Leon, the 3rd floor is the respiratory infectious disease area. There are no patients now. Send them up. The gentleman is here, I will explain to him. In the midst of the chaos, Mrs. Belland hugged her daughter tightly and did not dare to let go. Soon someone came to greet them. Is the little girl sick? Can she still walk? If she can't walk, bring the stretcher. Madam, are you feeling uncomfortable? If you feel uncomfortable, just go with the little girl. If you don't feel uncomfortable, go to the observation area. Mrs. Belland looked around. After standing at the door for a while, she saw at least 3 priests trotting over. They can't afford the pastor's treatment, for families like them, when they get sick, they have to bear it by themselves. At most, they can only buy some medicine. I'm fine. Mrs. Berland endured another cramp in her stomach and gritted her teeth. Can I stay with my daughter? She will be scared if she can't see me. Those who are not sick should go to the observation area. The boy who greeted her was fully equipped with a hat, mask, and gloves, and he looked like he was facing a formidable enemy. His eyes were still smiling, but his tone had become stiff. Quick, take the person away. Take samples. Send them for examination. Hurry, run. A man wearing full epidemic medical uniforms ran over with a transparent disc, pulled Xiao Li onto the disc, pulled her away and left. Just as Mrs. Berland was about to ask more questions, she felt another overwhelming abdominal pain. Her vision went dark, she squatted down and was supported by the young man. Are you feeling unwell too? Can you still walk? If you can walk, follow your daughter. If you can't walk, just wait. The stretcher will be here soon. I'll go up. She met a young man in the middle of the hall. The black hair on the young man's forehead was completely wet and stuck to his forehead. As soon as he rushed into the hall, he shouted, Leon, how many patients are there now? How many healers have come? Sir, there are 129 patients. There are 9 priests from the Church of the God of Nature, 17 from the God of War Temple, and 12 from the Spring Temple, Leon Carlos responded. Gretel swayed on his feet and asked urgently. What are the symptoms? Abdominal bloating, abdominal pain, constipation, diarrhea, nausea and vomiting, headache and bloating, no strength to open eyes. By the way, there are a few who said they couldn't see clearly, their limbs were numb, their lips and tongue were numb. Leon handed over a brochure. Gretel scanned it 10 lines at a time, and his heart was racing. Such a large-scale disease is mostly related to the intestinal tract, so there is no doubt that it is an infectious disease. Intestinal diseases are mostly transmitted through feces or mouth, but what is the specific transmission route? Food. Water. Sewer. Water pipe. Should we put everyone in quarantine? 12 buildings, how many residents are there? Before he could finish his thoughts, several more carriages stopped one after another. The apprentices went up to pick people up, arrange transportation, and inquire about their illness. At the same time, the apprentices who had sent the previous batch of patients had already rushed down. Seeing Gretel in the hall, they filed up and reported. 3 patients, one has abdominal pain and diarrhea, one has a fever of 37.8 degrees, headache and vomiting, and one has severe abdominal pain and bloating. 2 patients, one has abdominal pain, diarrhea, bloody stools, and a fever of 38.5 degrees, and the other. 4 patients. Greet stood upright in the crowd of apprentices, looking at the patients pulled in one by one, as if he saw everything, and as if he saw nothing at all. 129 patients, 133, 135, 139, 146, I don't know how many patients are behind. They only have 38 priests now. Among the apprentices at his disposal, there are only 12 healers, all of whom are apprentices. Oh, the girl from the natural god cult has recently advanced to a level 1 priest. There is also a mage apprentice in the medical branch who can be used as a healer. Suddenly another apprentice rushed down the stairs. She was small and wearing a heavy epidemic medical uniform. She could only tell from her voice that she was a girl. She came in and shouted, "Pastor! Is there any more pastor? There is a little girl dying." Mrs. Belland only heard the words "the little girl is dying." She made a trombone sound, turned around and pounced on the young man in the center of the crowd. Halfway through, her legs felt weak and she fell down, but she didn't feel the pain at all. She crawled and squeezed into the crowd, hugging Greet's legs. "My daughter! Save my daughter!" 3,000 words. Another update with 10,000 rewards has been completed. Only the last one left, meow 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 meow. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. Thanks to at ample time for tipping 100 starting coins. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 315. Gretel subconsciously took a step back. It's not that I dislike it, but I want to stay away from the source of infectious diseases as much as possible to avoid getting pathogens on the patient or the patient's family members. After all, he doesn't have disposable sterilizing gel now, so he can rub it wherever he goes. Mrs. Belland was immediately lifted up and taken to the ward. Gretel watched her go away, and then looked at the hospital entrance. The patients were being brought in a steady stream, and he felt the pressure on his shoulders was like a mountain. He's never had this kind of pressure. In his previous life, he was just the deputy chief physician of the emergency department. When he discovered a suspected severe infectious disease, he reported it to the director, dean, and CDC according to regulations, and the appropriate people would naturally deal with it. Besides, he is an emergency surgeon, surgery. The first group of colleagues who deal with infectious diseases are basically internal medicine. Even when he needs to go into battle, there are doctors from the internal medicine department by his side to provide consultations, and doctors from the laboratory department, ultrasound department, and imaging department to give reports. There are anesthesiologists who monitor patients' vital signs. If the power is not enough, there are other hospitals in the city. In case of a major disaster, there are also medical staff from the province and the country. If one side is in trouble, support from all sides will be provided. Even in Heartland City, he had teachers, a bald bishop, and many teachers and friends he could rely on. And now, he is standing at the forefront facing this plague, facing countless diseases, pain, and death. He was head of the Department of Public Health and the first director of the Hospital for Infectious Diseases. What everyone is looking at, what everyone is waiting for, is him. Greet now felt as if he were standing alone in the middle of the Chiantang River, facing the surging tide. The tide was turbulent and turbulent. At first it was just a thin line, and gradually it converged inward along the mouth of the trumpet. The waves became higher and higher, like galloping horses or giant elephants. When they came to him, they were roaring and rolled down on his head, almost drowning him. Medine. Patient number 43 on the first floor has severe abdominal pain and is about to faint. Patient number 57 on the first floor has abdominal pain, bloating, and a bulging belly. He has rolled out of bed 3 times. Patient number 17 on the second floor vomited blood. 3 more patients have fainted. The treatment power is not enough. Sir, do you want to go to the medical branch to ask for help? Gentlemen. Gentlemen. I have to hold on, I can't panic, Gretel silently encouraged himself. Calm down, the core of the question now is, what kind of disease is this? Abdominal pain and diarrhea are most likely intestinal infectious diseases. However, combined with abdominal distension and constipation, typhoid or paratyphoid. Bacillary dysentery. Bacterial food poisoning. Cholera. Paracholera. Bacterial diarrhea. Viral enterithes. Greed filtered them one by one in her heart. He no longer looked at the endless stream of patients at the entrance of the hall, turned around and ran to the ward. While walking quickly, I asked, "Are there any results from the sampling test? Have the patient's stool microscopy results come out? Where are the bacterial culture results? Let them hurry up. Speed up." After saying that, he ran into the first ward. Previously, he had been in the map room, or it could be regarded as the command center of the infectious disease hospital, checking the sources of all cases. Most of them were in the 12 buildings of the noble house, and a small number of those who fell ill outside were also residents of the building. Are there any new patients around the patients who are sick outside? Should we block and quarantine along the path of the patient? Gretel doesn't know this yet. All he could do for the time being was to ask the mage tower to speed up the production of disinfectant and speed up the disinfecting. At the same time, he placed an urgent order with the thunder tower. As for determining what kind of disease it is, the test results can only provide a partial reference. After all, their culture microscopy method is very crude and many reagents are not available. Another part of the key information comes from examination of the patient. He came to check it out himself. These students are not professional medical students. He personally examines the body and can see more than the students. Greet walked into the ward quickly. The first few rooms on the first floor are filled with patients who have been treated by various temples. They have now recovered or are in some relief and are lying on the bed to rest. Gretel skipped these rooms and walked to Ward 4 in one breath. The ward was in chaos. The hospital is short of manpower and cannot help every patient go to the toilet, so they have to put a wooden basin or bucket beside each person's bed and let them pull up the curtain to relieve themselves. Greet looked at the beds one by one. Watery stool, black stool, blood in the stool, this is nothing, constipation, bloating, this is also bloating, this is bloating, abdominal pain. How do you feel? Stomach pain? Where does it hurt? Lie down and let me check for you. The middle-aged woman curled up on the bed was already a little dying. Gretel put his hand on it, and she just hummed weakly. Greet pressed hard with his palm, continued to press down, and then quickly released it. The middle-aged woman struggled with pain, tenderness and rebound pain. Fortunately, it was not a slab-shaped abdomen and there were no obvious signs of peritonitis. Greet comforted her and moved on to the next one. But this one had abdominal pain, bloating, and moderate fever. Gretel asked about it. Not only was he constipated, but he didn't even fart. Stop venting. Greet took out the endless ink pen and quickly made a magic X-ray for the patient. In a meditation environment, the fluid level can be seen, the abdominal fat line is blurred, the ascending colon is inflated and expanded, and there is free air under the diaphragm. There are signs of peritonitis, but not serious. It looks like acute intestinal obstruction, but something feels wrong. Greet, what's going on now? Pastor Matthew hurried over. After the patients were brought in, he kept busy in the ward, treating one after another, and did not stop until the last 2 treatments were left. He is older than Greet and has more experience. He has been thinking about it on the way to send the patient here. When he saw Gretel, he asked casually, "What kind of sickness is this?" "Yeah, what kind of disease is it?" a bishop from the God of War temple also asked. Gretel couldn't help but laugh when he raised his head. The person who came here was the one who watched him write the medical records that night and made him talk about the medical records. He nodded and said hello. "Bishop Sullivan." Yeah, Bishop Sullivan nodded casually. "What disease do you think this is?" "Cholera." "It's not cholera," Greet replied quickly. "There is constipation, abdominal distension, black stool, and no rice-like stool. Cholera should be ruled out. Let me think about it." "What about typhoid fever?" another priest from the Spring Temple also spoke up. Greet continued to shake his head. "Unlike the incubation period of typhoid fever, it is the period of time before a person becomes sick after being infected. It will be relatively long. Patients are usually brought in one after another, some are mild and some are severe. Like now, starting from the disease was very urgent, and a large number of patients were sent in within a few hours. Typhoid fever cannot do this." "Is that food poisoning?" another loud voice interrupted. Gretel raised his head and quickly saluted. "Archmage Tolga." "Don't waste time," Archmage Tolga waved his hand. He immediately turned to the ward and quickly cast 2 spells. The white light shone around, and the patient's pain on the bed was immediately relieved, and he could already sit up halfway. Master Tolga asked seriously, "Do you have enough manpower now? Do you want me to call more people? By the way, what's going on with these people? Are they all hungry? Is the water source polluted?" "We are also considering that the water source is contaminated," Greet replied respectfully, "but the main characteristics of gastrointestinal food poisoning are nausea, vomiting, abdominal pain, and diarrhea, excluding constipation and bloating. At the same time, constipation and bloating will occur." "What kind of food poisoning is it?" "I'm still checking for the disease." "Then is the water source contaminated?" "The water supply is also being tested." "But Master, the pollution of the water source is just a symptom. What kind of thing has polluted the water source and how to treat it in a targeted manner? We are still looking for the cause. Call more people, of course it is good, but, no, to find out the reason, just calling people may not be enough." "Not enough?" Archmage Tolga raised his eyebrows. "Do you know how many people are here in the medical branch?" All I know is that in the worst case scenario, half of the 500,000 people in Nevis could be infected." Gretel lowered his head and did not reply. And in the corridor, a series of footsteps were approaching in a hurry. "Sir, the number of patients now exceeds 200. People in the quarantine area are getting sick one after another. Another 15 patients are in critical condition. Urgent treatment is needed. There are still patients coming in all the time. Abnormal bacteria were detected in the tap water of 10 patients' homes. Bacterial culture and experiments are being done. Sir, do you want to test the pipes in the entire building?" Greet lowered his head and pondered for a moment, then slowly raised his head. "Those 12 buildings, how many households are there in those 12 buildings? How many people live there?" Archmage Tolga also followed his gaze. In front of Greet, the young man ran over holding a notebook, panting and sweating profusely. He lowered his head and flipped through 2 pages of the book, moved his lips slightly, and quickly gave the answer. "There are about 900 to 1,200 households, and the total number of residents is 3,600 to 6,000. As few as 3,600, as many as 6,000 people. Gretel turned to Archmage Tolga. Even if we don't count the spread of the plague, we still have to be prepared for 1,000 to 3,000 people to get sick within a day or two. Will the three religious groups, plus the medical branch, have enough treatment power? Archmage Tolga immediately became silent. When he walked in just now, he took a quick look, and everything he saw was serious. The Magic Council once estimated that for plagues like the Black Death, the Magic Council could treat up to 500 people a day. And there are 500, 2,500 left, and there will be more patients after the plague spreads. Then what are you going to do? Can your infectious disease hospital handle it? He asked with concern. Gretel bowed deeply. Your Majesty the Archmage, please invite as many colleagues from the medical branch as possible. As for the others, please give me some time. I will go to the laboratory to see if I can find out the culprit of this plague. Gretel turned away and hurried to the examination room. After putting on protective clothing, passing through the airlock, and entering the red zone, as soon as I stepped into the room, I heard several students wearing heavy epidemic medical uniforms and still thinking about arguing. What you did was wrong. What you did is wrong. Why did it change after training? Your hand must have slipped. Gretel, what's going on? Guess what disease it is? Those who have seen the answers in the group before are not allowed to tell. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, please ask for all kinds of. Thanks to Etkutanchari for the 1,500 starting coins. Last month, I passed 1,000 monthly votes and won a 100 UN bonus in the lottery. Thank you all. I'm not very lucky. It seems that the biggest prizes include app splash screens, full site banners, 10,000 UN in cash, etc. But if I am lucky enough to get the smallest prize, I will be satisfied. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 316. Hearing the quarrel among the apprentices in the examination room, Greet first breathed a sigh of relief. Thank goodness the pathogen was a bacterium, not a virus. If it's a virus, it's over. The diameter of the virus is smaller than the wavelength of visible light, so the visible light waves will bypass the virus and cannot be seen under an optical microscope. To identify viruses, you need an electron microscope. If you want to make an electron microscope, you need to figure out a lot of prerequisite technologies such as atoms, electrons, and wave-particle duality, but it is impossible to do it now. Thanks to bacteria, luckily to bacteria. After Gretel breathed a sigh of relief, he closed the door behind him and glanced into the examination room. What are you arguing about? He was completely wrapped in a protective suit, and it was hard to tell what his face was like. However, just this question caused 4 people in the examination room to mute their voices at the same time. Gretel even saw 2 people shrinking their necks, as if silent. Am I so scary? If he wasn't pressed for time, he would really want to complain about this. However, there were hundreds of patients waiting outside, and Gretel could only move forward and look at the petri dishes in front of everyone. What did you make? Alas, this protective suit was pitch black, and their faces were covered so tightly that it was impossible to tell who was who. Next time, they should be asked to write their names on the protective clothing, or put a name tag on them. Gretel walked towards the microscope closest to him, and the apprentice next to him immediately stepped aside and complained. Sir, you see, what I made was one by one, and he used the things I extracted to make it, and what he made was long strips. I said he did it wrong, but he still doesn't believe it. One by one, one long strip and one long strip. Gretel's brain was spinning rapidly, searching for various possibilities. What did you do? Smear, the apprentice replied confidently. Gretel heard it this time. The person in charge of doing the smears was a necromancer apprentice. He was careful and steady, and he was one of the first 8 people to pass the bacterial culture test. This time he was sent to work in the laboratory. What I did was patient fecal smears and environmental sampling smears. This kind of bacteria was seen in both smears, and the amount was extremely large. I asked him to take it for culture, and what he produced was different from mine. It must have made miscellaneous bacteria. Let me take a look. Gretel was non-committal and leaned over the microscope to take a look. He stretched out his hand and slowly turned the knob, and the image under the lens enlarged little by little. The image of bacteria appeared in the lens. Gretel only took one glance, and his heart was pounding. He couldn't help but lean down and get closer to the lens. The bacteria in the lens were much larger than he expected. Gretel closed his eyes slightly and quickly flipped through medical microbiology in his mind, constantly searching for Escherichia coli, size is 0.40.7, asterisk, 13, microns. Shigella dysentery, 0.50.7, asterisk, 23, microns. Salmonella that causes typhoid fever and paratyphoid fever, 0.61.0, asterisk, 24, microns. Vibrio cholerae, 0.50.8, asterisk, 1.53, micron. Bacillus anthracis, 13, asterisk, 510, microns. Both length and width are much larger than other pathogenic bacteria. It is the first pathogenic bacterium discovered in human history, and it is also the largest gram-positive bacilli among pathogenic bacteria. This was emphasized by the teacher in class in the previous life. Gretel's breath hitched. If you look closely, you will see that in the smear under the microscope, there are short rods with some oval shapes in between. Gretel looked at several smears and found this particularly large bacterium, which was exactly the same as the Bacillus anthracis he had extracted before. Because the product was too dangerous, Gretel did not take out the germs for the apprentices to cultivate. He only briefly talked about the characteristics and showed them the picture album. Anyway, he was studying medical microbiology that year. Not every bacteria has been seen, and most of them are memorized like this. Maybe that's why the 2 apprentices are arguing with each other here before they can react. Gretel suppressed his pounding heart. He nodded to the necromancer apprentice and then turned to the other side. I'll also take a look at what you made. Sir, here the other apprentice also made way. The girl with a clear female voice and a figure that is considered tall among women is the girl who brought a few wild boars. Thanks to the recent intensive training and perhaps the development of biogas, she has been promoted to an official priest. Because she mastered the microbial growth technique, Gretel also arranged for her to be in the laboratory, specifically responsible for bacterial culture. Gretel looked carefully at the microscope in front of her. Before the knob was turned in place, her fingers stopped. Under the microscope, a large group of bacteria are connected head to tail, arranged in long chains, shaped like bamboo knots. When fresh specimens are directly smeared, they are often single or in the form of short chains. After culture, they form long chains arranged like bamboos. In medical microbiology, lines of text jump into my mind like thunder and lightning. Bamboo pattern. These 3 words are specially bolded in the textbook, and there are even pictures. Gretel felt like his breath was getting choked. The results of bacterial microscopy, the symptoms of patients outside, and the answer obtained by combining the 2. Intestinal anthrax. It is extremely rare, with an incidence rate of only 5% of the total cases of this category B epidemic, but it is extremely dangerous. It is easy to be complicated by sepsis, and death occurs 2 to 3 days after the onset of the disease. Without treatment, the mortality rate is between 25% and 70%. Is this really a disease? Wait a minute, we need to verify it, we need to verify it one last time. Gretel turned to the apprentices in the laboratory. Do the culture test again. This time, add penicillin to the plate culture medium. The content of penicillin is 0.050.5 units per milliliter of culture medium. Now, immediately, do it again. A necromancer, a magician from the school of transformation, and two priests of the god of nature, responded at the same time, and started to make arrangements quickly. Greet had previously taught them how to calculate the penicillin content. The amount of penicillin that can inhibit the reproduction of Staphylococcus aureus in every 50 ml of broth is 1 unit. Add an appropriate amount of penicillin to the agar to make a plate culture medium, add the bacteria sample, and throw the spawn spell on it. It's different again. Sir, what we did this time is different again. Show me. Gretel stepped in front of the microscope. Under the lens, there are no longer long bamboo-shaped chains, but large and uniform balls, arranged in a long string of beads. Penicillin bead test, positive. Direct smears are often single or short chains. After culture, they form long chains arranged like bamboos, which appear like beads on the culture medium containing trace amounts of penicillin, the same bacteria, 3 different forms, he said. In medical microbiology, among the pathogenic bacteria learned in, this is the only one that exhibits the above characteristics. No more flukes. In other words, God has given them the only luck, and they can no longer expect more. Greet closed her eyes hard. He looked at the 2 apprentices doing the smear test. Where do the inspection materials and environmental inspection materials you do come from? Both apprentices bent over the record book at the same time. The one from the necromancy school was very articulate and had already read out quickly. 39, Gladstone Street, Room 101, Room 115, Room 213, tap water for culture. Room 218, Room 305, Room 312, 25, Cameron Street, tap water for culture. Room 105, Room 105, Basement 11, Number 37, Alama Street, faucet. It is indeed a water source. 3 different buildings, 8 different households, drinking water supplied from the taps, and pathogenic bacteria were detected at the same time. There is only one possibility: the water source is contaminated. Greet felt more and more certain. He pointed to the 2 apprentices in the examination room, the one from the School of Change, and the tall girl from the Order of the God of Nature. None of you did anything wrong. This kind of bacteria will indeed take on different forms under different conditions. Go back and review my lecture notes again. You 2, put down your work immediately and come out with me. There is something more important. Things are for you to do. For the other 2, please do it slowly and keep the number of casts today. A batch of important inspection materials will come over later. You read my note and give priority to inspection. Yes. Yes. Greet took the people away in a hurry. However, no matter how anxious he was, he still had to abide by the laboratory rules: shower with disinfectant water, take off protective clothing, take a second shower, put on the same clothes when you came in, wear a hat, mask, and gloves. After completing a set of procedures, I returned to the outside room. The hospital was already so busy that it was almost on fire. Patient number 57 on the first floor is dying. Pastor. Pastor. Patient number 113 on the first floor is in a coma. 2 more people escaped from the quarantine area. Do you want to catch them? Let me out. Let me out. I'll be fired if I don't go to the union. Mom, Mom, help dash. The 3rd floor is also full. Where are the patients sent? Gretel walked quickly through the passage. Along the way, in almost every ward, there was a white light of healing power flashing. Walking to the hall, Archmage Tolga sat among a group of low-level medical magicians, all of them looked tired and covered in sweat. Master Tolga took out the fruits from the space bag and was throwing them to them one by one. Greed hurried over. "Don't eat here. You must wash your hands before eating. Wash your hands thoroughly. Change your clothes. Soak all your clothes in disinfectant. If possible, burn them. Your clothes and hands are contaminated with pathogenic bacteria. Eat without cleaning them. Things can also get the plague. Damn it! The popularization of science about infectious diseases and aseptic procedures must be carried out as soon as possible, otherwise, before the people are cured, there will be a wave of hospital infection, which is a big joke." "Did you hear that?" Master Tolga quickly shouted to his disciples. At the same time, several priests also walked out of the ward upstairs, their faces equally exhausted and their bodies covered in sweat. Bishop Sullivan of the Ares Temple even slipped on the stairs, barely holding onto the handrail, and walked quickly towards Greed. "The healing power is not enough. I've called everyone who can, but it's still not enough. Little Greed, what else can you do?" "Give me some time." Greed breathed tiredly. "Your Excellency, Archmage, Bishop, please take them with you and try to save spells as long as the patient does not die. Give me time. Fight for me time. 3,000 words. Today is another 6,000 words. Red Comet Mars 3,000 rewards have been paid off. I forgot to mention it at noon. Thank you everyone for collecting another 10,000 UN reward. I will continue to add more tomorrow. I dropped a lot of soil on my CAO Yola once and poured it back. Today I found that the bottom leaf was shriveled. Should I water it today or should I wait a few days for the soil I bought to arrive and move the pot to water it together? It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 317. Gretel walked out of the infectious disease hospital quickly. As he walked, he shouted, "All priests of the Order of the God of Nature, come to my mage tower. All. Put down your work and your patience." Immediately. He added a sound amplification technique to himself, and the sound shook the whole building. Answers sounded one after another from behind. "Okay. Coming." Immediately. Greed stopped waiting for them and walked straight forward. As soon as they stepped down the steps, a horse rushed over with billowing smoke. The knight jumped down and hurriedly grabbed Gretel. "I'm here. Why are there so many patients all at once? What kind of disease is it? What else needs to be done?" The person who came was tall, with a resolute face and a weather-beaten face. It was Johnny Collin, the Minister of Emergency Management. Minister Collin had dealt with Gretel several times and knew that he would never cause trouble to anyone, but it would definitely be a big deal if he did. Greet asked him for help before, and he immediately dispatched operators from the Emergency Management Department according to the original plan. A group of men in black, together with Gretel's apprentices, were busy sealing off the neighborhood, picking up people door to door, and taking samples for testing. Colin did not lead the team himself, but sat down in the city hall and forced the person in charge to send out patrols to help. The Emergency Management Department handles all emergency matters related to magicians. Where is the manpower? At this time, we must decisively drag the city hall into trouble. He was not someone who had never seen the plague before. He estimated that the first wave of outbreaks would have tens of hundreds of patients. However, as the carriages came back and forth, the numbers reported by subordinates increased and exceeded 200 in the morning. Johnny Collin couldn't sit still and came to the door in person to ask what happened to Gretel. Gretel grabbed him with his backhand. While continuing to walk outside the hospital, he spoke faster. "I'm looking for you. Do you still remember that time when I asked you to chase the spies in the middle of the night? Several horses had black spots on their bodies, And some soldiers got sick as well? It was that disease, this time it was the water source that was contaminated, pathogenic bacteria attack through the intestines, which is more dangerous. I need your help. Johnny Collins' whole body trembled. That operation was still fresh in his memory. Their entire emergency management department was picked up in the middle of the night and ran along the mountain road for 2 days and 2 nights. It is said that the person who caused such a big battle was a high-level magician with a prophecy system, who divined a very bad omen. And this time, Gretel said it was more dangerous than last time. What else do you need me to do? He asked in a deep voice. Gretel answered without hesitation. 3 things. First, screen the residents of those 12 buildings again. If there are any signs of discomfort, send them all to the hospital as soon as possible. Second, take water samples from the main drainage pipes of each floor and send them to me for testing. If possible, take water samples from the main sluice of each building. If it is determined that the water body is contaminated, trace the water source as soon as possible. Third, according to the household list, people who work or study outside are sent to the hospital as soon as possible. All the places where these people were staying must be disinfected with double concentration disinfectant. Double. And you and your subordinates, be sure to pay attention to safety when performing tasks, and don't touch anything to eat until you've returned home, washed your hands, and changed your clothes. I'll make arrangements right away. Johnny led the horse and followed him. After hearing these requests, he immediately jumped on the horse. After taking 2 steps, he suddenly reined in his horse and turned around, scanning behind Gretel. Is your infectious disease hospital big enough? Can it accommodate so many people? Greet looked embarrassed. His infectious disease hospital has a rated capacity of 1,000 beds. The original plan was that if all these beds were really used, all the healers in the city would be brought here, and the patients would be sent away as soon as they were cured. Next to the hospital, there is also an isolation observation point that can accommodate 1,000 people. Now it seems that it is not enough. If all the residents of the 12 buildings are brought over for observation, the number of hospital beds will have to be doubled. He needs a makeshift hospital. Temporary isolation point is needed. Volunteers are needed to deliver food and water to those suspected, close contacts and observation subjects. Someone even needs to clean up their poop. It requires the entire social support system to work together behind the scenes. It was not that Greet had not thought of these needs when planning the infectious disease hospital and public health center. After all, he had seen the disaster before time travel and how the entire social system worked together in the face of disaster. However, as a third-level magician and the director of the Department of Public Health, he can only mobilize so many resources. For other requirements, the reviewer will give him the following reply. We'll talk about it then. Now that a lot of resources are needed, Greet wants to go to the review meeting, but can't spare the time. Johnny looked at his troubled expression and nodded. I understand. You need to expand your territory to accommodate more people, right? Leave it to me. Before Greet could answer, he had already whipped him and quickly left. Greet shouted from behind him, thank you. Thank you for what? Johnny Collins said without looking back. I am also from Xiakan district. I should help them. Gretel breathed a sigh of relief and rushed to the mage tower with the students. In the tower, there is the special medicine he has just made recently, and there is the only hope to fight against this plague. A strange smell filled the mage tower. The cauldron was simmering with thick corn slurry, and the strange smell of fermented penicillin was too strong to melt away. Gretel stopped in front of the fermentation room, turned around and looked at the female apprentice of the Order of the God of Nature. You wait here until the priests from the Order of the God of Nature arrive and tell them how to induce the growth of penicillium. I need them to use all their strength to promote the growth of penicillium. All their strength. The female apprentice pursed her lips and nodded. Gretel grabbed another apprentice of the change school and continued walking inside. Tell Mr. Norwood to expand the refining magic circle 10 times. 100 times. 500 times. Or make dozens more. I need him to expand production capacity. Immediately. Immediately. Penicillin. Penicillin. When there were no cephalosporins or other antibacterial agents, the only effective drug against intestinal anthrax was penicillin. Luckily he had already made it before. Isolated a strain of penicillium and made sodium penicillin. Gretel rushed to the top of the mage tower. Next to the control room, there is a small refrigerator that stores the most precious materials. Open the refrigerator door and take out a small glass bottle. 1 inch high and half an inch in diameter, it can't even fill the palm of your hand. It's so tiny. We were still in the process of strain selection and trial production before, and had not entered the mass production stage at all. So far, all penicillin sodium has not been used in culture, fermentation, refining and storage. Such a small bottle is only filled with 10 bottles. In each bottle, there are a little more than 5 grams and less than 6 grams. 0.48 grams of penicillin sodium is equal to 800,000 units, and 4.8 grams is equal to 8 million units. For patients with pulmonary and intestinal anthrax and concurrent meningitis, large dose penicillin G, 4 to 8 million units, once every 6 hours, intravenously infused. In other words, in the best case scenario, these penicillin sodium can only save 10 lives. We can only hope that the priests of the God of Nature will speed up. The power of so many priests is many times more powerful than one apprentice. And the damn four. He still doesn't dare to start intravenous injection rashly because he is not sure about the sterilization effect of the injection. The sterilization effect of the injection tube is unstable, he can only induce vines now, and the sealing effect of the connection between the injection needle and the syringe is unstable. In this case, using intravenous injection rashly is equivalent to injecting bacteria into the patient's blood vessels. There was really no other way but to take a gamble with intramuscular injection. Gretel's thoughts were racing. If you don't get treatment, you will die anyway, so you need to inject a large dose of penicillin into the muscle. By the way, you also need to prepare a needle. The injection needles in the Mage Tower are usually used for animal experiments, no more than 50 at a time, and destroyed after use. How many patients are there now? How many secondary syringes do I need to prepare? Gretel sat down in the storeroom. He opened the space bag and took out a large piece of glass, a piece of metal specially provided by the Dwarves. It is said to be a top-secret formula and will not rust, and a large bag of gold coins. He grabbed a handful of gold coins and threw them to the ground, making a jingling sound. This is a strategic material for emergencies. Gretel usually keeps it sealed and is reluctant to touch it, but now, it's time to use it on a large scale. He held the silver bell. He pressed his palm hard enough to almost squeeze out water from the surface of the bell, and said in a deep voice, "Time is money, my friend." His speech was very fast and smooth, without any weird accent. Blue smoke soon appeared from the bell, and the little monster jumped down. Gretel pointed at the supplies on the ground and said in a hurry, "Make syringes. 10 ml ones. Make 1000 syringes first. Hurry." The little monster's hands flew. The glass, metal, and gold coins on the ground seemed to have fallen into a magic furnace and melted silently. The metal is cut, pressed into thin sheets, curled, and chipped to ensure that the needle tube is straight and even. The needle tip has a sharp bevel, and sufficient strength and smoothness are ensured. The glass turns red, liquefies, flows, rises in the air, and is shaped into a hollow syringe, the end of which opens to wrap around the end of the metal needle. The other end fits tightly and can be pushed smoothly without any leakage. A syringe, and another syringe, appeared brightly in front of Gretel. It's just that the speed is a bit slow, and I can only make 2 sticks per minute. At this speed, I can only make 120 sticks in an hour. Can you hurry up? He urged. Can the speed be increased by 5 times? Can we make 600 pieces in 1 hour? Intramuscular injection is simple to operate, and with a little training, every student can complete it independently. If the production capacity of penicillin can keep up, and the production capacity of syringes can also keep up, and intramuscular injections can be completed for 600 patients within an hour, then perhaps hundreds more lives can be saved. The gremlin was concentrating on manipulating his magic power and did not answer him. It wasn't until another syringe fell to the ground that it replied hoarsely. It costs money. To increase the speed by 5 times, you need 25 times the gold coins. Take it. Greed picked up the money bag and fell down without even counting it. Time is money, my friend. This moment, time, is life. Another 3,000 words. P.S. Reading has plummeted recently. Is it because my writing is not good and no one reads it, or is it because the summer vacation is coming to an end and the children are all going to make up for their summer homework? Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. It's the 28th, it's almost the end of the month, hand over the last monthly ticket. Don't hold it in your hands. Thanks to @WarEconomist, @Nengrufeng for the 100 starting coins reward. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Jia-Lan 2020. Chapter 318. Greet watched for a moment, leaving the gremlin upstairs to continue working, and quickly went downstairs. Whether he is watching or not, the little monster is still working like that, without slowing down the work or reducing the quality of the product. So, on this side, you can rest assured for the time being. What he needs to pay more attention to now is the production and quality of penicillin. The production room is steaming. Led by Pastor Matthew, the 6 pastors each faced a beaker, their eyes slightly closed, and muttered something. A green light shone on the palms and fingertips, falling on the bit of bacteria in the beaker, and soon dyed the entire beaker green. In the production room, the only female apprentice with experience in cultivating penicillium was walking around lightly and quickly, stopping in front of a certain beaker from time to time, closing her eyes for a moment, and whispering various key points. Pay attention to the temperature of the culture medium. The medium must be stirred constantly to maintain its vitality. Gretel stood quietly at the door of the production room for a while. After completing her inspection, the female apprentice walked towards him quickly and lightly, asking for instructions in a low voice. "Sir, is this okay? Is this speed enough?" "Far from enough." Gretel shook his head firmly. The production efficiency of 6 people working together is indeed much higher than that of 1 person. At least as far as Greet can see, the amount produced in this wave is equivalent to their usual output in a day. But now, what they need is to produce the output that usually takes 500 days or even 1000 days in 1 day. Anavi, he tried to relax his brows and encouraged the female apprentice. "I know you work hard, you all work hard. But now, we need to increase our production capacity 100 times or 200 times to save these patients. Work harder, their lives are in your hands. When will Elderwood arrive?" The last sentence was asked to Pastor Matthew. When sending the patient to the hospital, Pastor Matthew had already noticed that something was wrong and used the sex-unique method to send an urgent message to Elderwood. However, Gretel has no idea where the elder is now or when he will arrive. "I'm here." After saying that everyone had arrived, Elderwood strode in quickly. There were 5 or 6 priests following behind them, apparently pulling over all the people of the sect who could be found nearby. After entering the door, he looked around and then said to Greet, "You want to make this little thing grow longer? Leave it to me, I'll help. Not only that, the main thing is to make it secrete more effective substances that can kill bacteria. Gretel quickly explained to Elderwood. After a brief description, he demonstrated the effect of instilling penicillium into Staphylococcus aureus to inhibit the killing of bacteria. Then, take Elderwood to the magic circle used for extraction and let him observe the process of filtration, centrifugation, sodium hydroxide addition, and magic purification. What is needed is the substance. It would be best if the penicillium can grow more and secrete more of the substance. It can save the patient's life. I understand. Elderwood's eyes were half open and half closed throughout the whole process, and he seemed to be distracted, but Greet knew that he was using magic power to sense every detail. After the demonstration, he immediately drove Greet away. I'll take care of the production, you go and do yours. Let me work together. The syringes are still being produced and need to be sterilized at high temperatures after production. We still have an hour and a half. Elderwood readily agreed. He and Greet stepped into the production room together, followed the penicillium production process, and soon began to give orders. You two, Level 1 and Level 2, are responsible for the first round of growth of penicillium. You two, Level 3 and Level 4, are responsible for the second round of births. Don't use small jars, use the largest jars to induce vines, and connect the 3 levels of jars. Matthew, you take other people with levels above 5 to be responsible for the third round of growth. One person is responsible for stirring, and the other is responsible for input the fire energy, and everyone else is responsible for outputting the power of nature to make these little things grow. Leave the task of optimizing the bacterial strains to me. Greet looked at Elderwood with shocked eyes. He vaguely remembered hearing gossip from his pharmacy students that the current industrial production of penicillin was indeed a process of doubling once, doubling twice, and then mass-producing in large jars. Elder, did you rub it out with your bare hands? He turned around and ran away. You don't need to collect the fire gas. I'll set up the electrolysis device. Isn't it just electrolyzed water? Doesn't it mean that a little sodium hydroxide needs to be added to the electrolyzed water? Now Master Tower is working hard to produce bleaching powder. How much sodium hydroxide is the byproduct? How much is it? The arrival of Elderwood accelerated the entire production process. The entire Mage Tower rumbled and rotated at high speed. The flames flickered, the cornstarch boiled, and then quickly dropped to the right temperature under the cooling magic. The centrifuge rotated at full speed, and the buzzing sound was so loud that even the invisible servants in the magic tower started running. The tower spirit moss is fixed in the core of the magic tower. It has no long legs and can only admire beside Gretel. Master, I have never seen our magic tower work so efficiently. When the first batch of 600 syringes was produced and the high-temperature sterilization was completed, a 10*10 piece of the small bottle containing penicillin sodium was already laid out in front of Greet. 100 bottles, 4.8 g each, 8 million units. At least enough for the first batch. Enough for the most urgent and dangerous patients. The big stone pressing on Gretel's chest finally loosened a little. He bowed deeply to Elderwood. Elder, thank you so much. Thank you for being here. Please take these penicillium molds and continue to promote them. The more, the better. I only worry about too little here, not that the output will not be used. After finishing, send it to me quickly, it's urgent. He picked up 2 boxes. The smaller one contained penicillin, and the larger one contained 600 sterilized syringes. Stuffed them into the space bag and rushed to the infectious disease hospital. It's been more than an hour. How are the patients? How many people became critically ill? Are there any patients who died before resuscitation could be done? Greet was distraught. Even if he repeatedly told himself that it would take 2 to 3 days from the onset of intestinal anthrax to death from septicemia, he could not help but feel anxious. The magic horse is considerate and runs fast and steady, but Greet can't help but urge him repeatedly. If it weren't for his limited riding skills and lack of tools at hand, he would have to use his whip and spurs. Drive, 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 Gretel kept shouting while lying on the horse. The journey from the Mage Tower to the infectious disease hospital was only about 1 kilometer, and the magic horse arrived quickly at full gallop. Seeing the hospital gate from a distance, Gretel suddenly reined in his horse. What happened? This is his infectious disease hospital, not a prison, and it's not a zombie siege. Let me out. Let me out. On the side of the hospital, on the high wall, 7 or 8 people were trying their best to climb over it. Outside the wall, a group of uniformed patrols held their spears upside down and stabbed them back hard. Why are you running? Don't you know you are infected with the plague? If you are let out now, you may get sick at any time and fall down somewhere. Master Mage is kind-hearted and leaves you here to watch. You still don't know what is good for you. Die. Forget it. If you stay outside, if you drag the whole city to death with you, you won't be able to enter the kingdom of God even if you die. Greed. This is not a big deal. One good thing about anthrax is that human-to-human transmission is relatively rare. The patrolman poked and cursed vigorously. Greed had already seen 3 or 4 people being poked down, while others were still clinging to life and climbing. In the commotion, 2 men in black left the carriage and ran from a distance. They were the action team of the emergency management department. The leading magician raised his voice. What are you yelling at them for? He drank a magic character and pointed to the wall. A faint magical light flashed across the wall, and everyone on the wall looked confused. They all let go of their hands and jumped off the wall. He galloped towards the hospital entrance and thanked him on the way. The magician who took action smiled calmly. Oh, it's not a big deal. It's just a shot of charm humans to calm them down. Every magician in our emergency management department must practice it. It's especially useful when dealing with large-scale riots by people. Before he finished speaking, another head popped up on the wall, but it was the one that had just been charmed before. The magic worked before, and the patrolling guards also relaxed a little vigilance and did not poke with their spears in time. I saw the man struggling to climb over the wall, rolling and falling, and landed on the ground. He got up, didn't even have time to stand upright, and ran out as hard as he could. The 2 guards cursed and immediately chased after him. The man who climbed over the wall was obviously injured in the fall and ran with a limp. He was quickly escorted by the guards. Greed saw at a glance that it was a brown-haired boy, struggling and shouting. Let me out. If I don't go to work, my boss will fire me. Unemployment is as fierce as a tiger. Greed sighed secretly. The threat of unemployment is really too powerful. It can make workers break their heads and still go to work, or wake up in the ICU with excessive blood loss and still write code. It can also make workers in this world, has the power to fight against charming humans. Thinking of his previous life as a working man, he secretly shed tears of sympathy for himself. The boy's arms were cut behind his back by 2 guards, and he shouted desperately. Let me out. I finally found a job yesterday. I'm unemployed. Without my salary, my brother can't study. And my mother and little Lila. They are all sick, and they have to rely on money for treatment. I'll earn it. Well. All living beings suffer. Greed sighed slightly. The young man struggled and was escorted past him. Suddenly he stretched his head as hard as he could and shouted to him. Sir. Mr. Magician, how is my mother? How is little Lila? Save them. Please, please save them. Gretel had heard such hoarse shouting countless times in his previous life, and every time without exception, it made him feel pity. But in a matter of life and death, where would he find the strength to reverse it? The infectious disease hospital was full of patients, including an unknown number of critically ill patients. He had no idea who the boy's mother and sister were. As for the problem of unemployment after being quarantined, even the government in his previous life couldn't solve it, so what can he do on his own? Gretel couldn't even look into the young man's pleading eyes and say to him, "We will do our best," like he did in his previous life. He could only be cruel, turned away and rushed into the hospital quickly. As soon as he entered the hall, he asked Leon Carlos, who was coordinating the arrangements at the door. "What's going on now? How many critically ill patients are there? God bless, the first batch of penicillin he brought over must be enough. 3,000 words. I finished another 6,000 words today. Got another update. I can finally write only 4,000 words tomorrow. I don't believe you can reward me with 100 UN in one night. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. It's the end of the month, hand over the remaining monthly passes for this month. Please also ask for a guaranteed monthly ticket for next month. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 319. Leon Carlos lowered his head and flipped through the record book. As expected, this young man grew up in a winery as a child, and was later thrown to the winery by Gretel, where he spent some time tinkering with technical improvements. After the experience of doing business, now patients are pouring in like a tide, and he has coordinated until now and it is still in order and not a mess. Greet asked, and when he flipped through the book, he could answer immediately. So far, 538 people have been admitted to the hospital, 273 of whom are bedridden and unable to move. 97 people are unconscious or semi-conscious. Medical mages and priests are doing their best to treat them. 97 people. Greet breathed a sigh of relief. The first batch of penicillin made by Elderwood's people included 100 bottles. Plus the 10 bottles he brought over, it was enough for each of 97 people. There's still enough left for a skin test, yes, a skin test. Thinking of the skin test, Greet's head was as big as two. Not only was it a skin test, he also injected intramuscularly with the drugs that were written in the book for intravenous infusion. The trouble involved also made him frown. After thinking about it, he sincerely felt that before using a killer weapon like penicillin, he should use magic to save the life. When he was in Heartland City, Elder Irwin's miraculous skill of directed killing of dysentery bacteria was still fresh in his memory. However, I was limited to the level at that time and didn't learn it. After I came to Nevis, I tried to learn on my own, but I couldn't find the threshold. Gretel had to lament that the power of I'm thinking in divine magic was really unreasonable sometimes. Maybe he needs a high-level healer to help develop it? However, Elderwood and all the God of Nature pastors were all recruited by him to make penicillin. Gretel thought for a moment between the Ares priest, the fountain goddess priest, and the magician from the medical branch. The balance in his heart didn't even sway, and he fell directly to the magician's side. He asked Leon Carlos and found Archmage Tolga in the lounge on the east side of the first floor. The great magician of the medical branch washed his hands and changed his clothes. After resting for a while, his expression softened a lot. Hearing Greet say that there was a new treatment method, he was very willing to try it. Kill a certain kind of germ accurately? Okay, let me give it a try. Gretel takes him to the examination room. After confirming that it was anthrax, Greet lowered the level of protection. Instead of wearing heavy leather epidemic medical uniforms, he wore long-sleeved pants, gloves, and a mask, plus a bubble mask on his head. After testing, this combination can achieve effective protection against bacteria. As long as you don't touch it with your hands and remember to wash your hands before removing the air bubbles and taking off the mask, it will basically not cause infection. Well, add a pair of goggles if necessary. I have to say that this equipment is much lighter and can be operated more sensitively in the examination room. Gretel showed various test materials to Archmage Tolga, the environment, water bodies, patient's excrement, etc., then operated the microscope, made smears, and let the Archmage observe everything. You see, it is this kind of bacteria, flat at both ends, without flagella, very large, that is responsible for this disease. If we can accurately kill the bacteria in the patient's body, we should be able to treat the disease. Is that so? Let me give it a try. Archmage Tolga pondered. Half a minute later, he stretched out his palm and pointed it at the slide under the microscope. A flash of white light flashed, and Gretel used the microscope to observe again. Maybe what you see now is a corpse. Wait a moment, I will do a bacterial culture to see. The results of the bacterial culture were very promising. No new strains of Bacillus anthracis emerged. Archmage Tolga cast sterilization spells on environmental and water samples, and the results were still quite optimistic. Greed was overjoyed, picked up the skin test solution prepared by his apprentice, and immediately took Master Tolga to the ward. They first found a patient with mild symptoms. Once targeted sterilization was performed, the patient had no reaction. Get another one. Another targeted sterilization was performed, but the patient still showed no signs of improvement. Maybe the metabolism of anthrax toxin also takes time. Gretel guessed. He gritted his teeth and chose a patient with abdominal pain, bloating, and symptoms of ascites on Magic B ultrasound examination, and asked Archmage Tolga to try casting a spell. After the first sterilization operation was carried out, after waiting for 5 minutes, Greed personally performed an abdominal puncture on the patient and took out the ascites for a culture test. The abdominal fluid extracted was red, like the residual water from washing meat. Stain microscopy still found Bacillus anthracis. This doesn't seem to work. Greed is troubled. Archmage Tolga's targeted sterilization technique seems to be ineffective on patients. What went wrong? He didn't dare to let the Archmage change his spells at will. Don't look at the size under the microscope, just look at the way it looks under the microscope and make up your mind to cast the spell. What if you make the mistake in your mind? If Bacillus anthracis is changed to E. coli, the balance of intestinal flora will be broken instantly. What if it is changed to white blood cells? What about red blood cells? Then the healing technique becomes the killing technique. Gretel thought about it over and over, but couldn't figure out what the problem was. He had no choice but to activate Plan B and conduct skin tests on the patients one by one. Penicillin allergy is dangerous, and Greed has no symptomatic medicine at hand. As long as the patient is not so sick that he is about to die, it is safer to do a skin test. You have clearly seen that the location for the skin test is on the palm side of the forearm, 2 fingers upward from the wrist crease, in the middle. A row of apprentices stood in front of Gretel, squeezing each other, listening to his explanation. The skin test is an intradermal injection. The injection needle is at an angle of 5 degrees to the skin, that is, it only needs to be slightly tilted. After inserting it, slowly push the potion. Okay, now each person receives 20 skin test needles and goes to do it. Let's do it. Let's do the skin test on the critically ill patient first. Fortunately, there were 301 ml skin test needles among the injection needles he had the little monster make before. The apprentices stormed off. Gretel also took 20 skin test needles, inhaled the potion one by one, and started operating. Pray while working. Never be allergic, never be allergic, never be allergic. Mr. Norwood's magic circle should be more reliable and don't have too many impurities. But to be honest, you will die from penicillin allergy, and you will die from anthrax. In comparison, you will die faster from allergy. He waited anxiously, like a little rabbit growing radishes, pulling it out every 5 minutes to see if the radishes were growing, Greet indeed walked around the ward every 5 minutes to see if there were any. Which patient is allergic to penicillin? After walking the second lap, there was a roar in the ward corridor and a group of people came towards me. Greet, let's go back first. The leader, Bishop Sullivan, greeted Greet from a distance. Gretel straightened up from the bedside and said in surprise, Master Bishop, are you leaving now? Let's go. Bishop Sullivan wanted to wipe away his sweat, but remembering Greet's numerous warnings about safety issues, he raised his hand halfway and put it down again. We have almost used all our magic, and there is no use staying here any longer. You, just hold on a little longer. When we go back, we will see if we can get the Archbishop to bring another group of people over. As he spoke, he looked towards the ward and then at Greet, with a hint of worry in his brows. Behind him, several God of War priests and several priests from the Spring Temple nodded together. It was obvious that they had all used their magical skills. Greet knows that the so-called almost used means that there is still 20% left. For ordinary healers, unless the situation is particularly urgent, always leave a little margin. Using up all your mental energy in one go can easily damage your roots. But, go back and ask the Archbishop? Not that easy. Invite the Archbishop, the great priest, and the jury will come forward. Although Greet had already asked Aurora to run away, Greet had no idea how much time it would take to wait for Archmage Carlyle to contact the review meeting, and then wait for the review meeting to invite a high-level healer. And letting them go now means that if a patient is allergic, there won't even be anyone to use magic to rescue him. How to keep them? Greet's mind was racing, but he smiled sincerely. Master Bishop, everyone, thank you for your hard work. By the way, I brought a new medicine from the Mage Tower. It may have special effects on this plague. Do you want to take a look? Bishop Sullivan was immediately moved. He became even more curious when he saw Greet take out a small bottle and shake the white powder inside at him. Looking left and right, I saw that several young pastors around me seemed a little unable to walk, and I couldn't help but say, then let's stay and see. Okay, Gretel led them in. This medicine has special effects on many people, but it has one disadvantage. It may be dangerous for some people whose physical constitution is not suitable for it. So you need to inject a small amount first to see if the patient will have any special reaction. Good boy, you are waiting for us here, Bishop Sullivan laughed teasingly. Despite the laughter, he still waited with Greet. After waiting for 20 minutes, no one knew whether it was a physical problem of people in this world or whether the magic circle had a miraculous effect on extracting impurities, but no one was actually allergic. Gretel thanked God in his heart and quickly took out all the penicillin. Quick! Speed up! Inject one for each critically ill patient, and if there are more, give them to other patients. Take the medicinal powder, mix it with physiological saline, draw the liquid, and inject it. A dozen students were so busy that they wanted to lift their toes to help. Archmage Tolga was also alerted, and stood shoulder to shoulder with Bishop Sullivan, with half-closed eyes, in front of the bed of Gretel's first patient who injected the medicine. Gretel knew that they were feeling the patient's breath of life. He really didn't have the skill. If it was not so busy, he would have to try to get some tips, but now, he can only leave them with tears and continue to inject penicillin to critically ill patients according to the list. 1 shot, 2 shots, 1 bottle, 2 bottles. The penicillin bottle in his hand was half empty, and there was a sudden noise in the corridor outside the ward. Gretel walked out of the ward and bumped into the Archbishop of the Temple of the God of War. The Archbishop simply nodded to him, walked past him, and asked his subordinates directly. Sullivan, what are you doing here? Haven't you used up your magic? If you don't go back to rest, why are you waiting in the epidemic area? After asking several questions at once, Bishop Sullivan turned around. He looked past his immediate boss and went directly to Gretel. Little Greet, your special medicine works. It really works. What? Gretel quickly rushed forward to take a look. It had been less than half an hour since the medicine was injected. According to the habit of the previous life, no changes in the patient's physical signs could be detected. But the bishop has already sensed. The patient's vitality has become stronger. The plague that is entangled in him has become weaker. Thanks to @Fengxiu Yuling and @Bookfriend 201701060508072666 for the reward of 10,000 starting coins. Thanks to @Liaolazi for the 1,500 starting coins reward. Thanks to @Ample Time for the 200 starting coins. Thanks it is said that if the nickname is less than 12 characters, you will lose the 100 starting coins for the reward. I just said that I would only be able to write 4,000 words today, and I got another 2,000 yuan reward. Even so, the author wants to go out for a good meal today. Only when you have a good meal will you have the strength to cope with the rewards and updates that will come in the future. Please subscribe, ask for monthly passes, ask for recommended votes, ask for book reviews, please ask for all kinds of things. It's the end of the month. Please give me the remaining monthly passes for this month and the guaranteed monthly passes for next month. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Jialan 2020. Chapter 320. What special medicine? The Archbishop of the God of War Temple was immediately attracted to his attention. When the army moves, the first headache is the plague, and the second headache is the large number of casualties on the battlefield. The latter can still kill 800 enemies even if he loses 1,000, but the former can inexplicably make a lot of people sick or even die without encountering anything. Non-combat attrition is the worst thing for morale. He looked at Bishop Sullivan, and Bishop Sullivan looked at Gretel. Before Greet could explain, another person squeezed in from the crowd and asked hurriedly, "What kind of special medicine is it? Did you just make it? Is it only effective against this plague? Can it be produced in large quantities?" A lot of questions were thrown at me. Greet took a closer look. An acquaintance. The person who asked the question was Old Sam, the member of Thunderhorn's review committee. Next to Old Sam, nodding silently, but with extremely focused eyes, was the member of the protection school. Behind them, Archmage Tolga stretched out half of his head and stared at him unblinkingly. They are all acquaintances, and they are all our own people. If you want me to say something, then I will say it. Gretel took out an empty bottle from his pocket and raised it to Old Sam. "This is it. It's finished. I'm waiting for the next batch to be delivered. It was just made not long ago and is still being improved. It is not only effective against this plague, but also has a curbing effect on many common diseases and plagues, for example, diphtheria, such as scarlet fever, meningococcal meningitis. Of course, dysentery, cholera, plague, tuberculosis, these are the same common plagues that penicillin cannot treat. You still have to go to the soil to separate, culture, and purify it, and try to produce things like streptomycin." The eyes of several big guys lit up. Greet pretended not to notice and continued. "Especially traumatic infections, with this, many can be effectively controlled." Bishop Sullivan took a step forward on the spot. Although the Archbishop of the God of War Temple did not react so much, his eyes lit up. After a war, no matter how many priests there are, it is impossible to take care of all the wounded soldiers. Most of the wounded soldiers died of infection. No one understands this probability better than them. If the small bottle of medicine in Greet's hand really has the effect on plague patients that he just sensed, it would be a battlefield weapon. Especially for those small teams that carry out lurking and attack missions, it is inconvenient to carry a healer. Having such a bottle of medicine is equivalent to carrying a bottle of holy water with you. The Archbishop was relatively reserved, his expression unchanged, and he only glanced at Bishop Sullivan. The bishop had already blurted out the question. "Master Nordmark, Can this medicine be mass-produced? Can it be sold to the outside world? How much does a bottle cost? How much is the sales volume? Cough. Old Sam gave a fake cough. Greet immediately took a step aside. Now, because of urgent need, Elderwood has led a group of people to help me produce using magic. A more efficient mass production method is still being studied. If it is actually produced, will it be sold? He glanced at the great magicians around him, and his meaning was clear. I, a third-level little magician, cannot make the final decision on such an important material, and I'm afraid the review committee will decide. The Archbishop said yeah, and in the crowd behind him, an unknown priest whispered. It's them again. They clearly knew what Gretel was developing in the Mage Tower, and their apprentices worked together with those from the Order of the God of Nature. When it came time to actually produce results, they were the ones who took a step forward. There is no way. Greet secretly spread his hands. The priest of the God of Nature has expertise in promoting the growth of penicillium. What method does he have, to chemically synthesize penicillin or something? Forgive him that he can't do it. Even if he can, the Temple of the God of War doesn't seem to be good at chemical engineering. Greet complained silently. The smile on his face is sincere and full of seriousness. However, there is a problem with this kind of special medicine, that is, some people are not adapted to it and are prone to special reactions. Rashes, dermatitis, anemia, nephritis, the most serious ones can cause the patient to be out of breath, blood pressure to drop rapidly, and shock. Or even death. So always try it with a very small dose before taking any medication. The Archbishop nodded slightly and took a step back. He didn't say anything and didn't intend to leave. He seemed to want to observe the effect of this special medicine with his own eyes. Greet also bowed to them and continued to work. Hey, there are still so many patients who need injections of medicine. Even though he is a doctor, he can only take on the responsibility of a nurse at the critical moment. Check the patient, draw medicine, inject, and record, then check the patient, draw medicine, inject, and record. Gretel used up all the medicines on hand in one go, then went to patrol the wards to observe the patients the apprentices were responsible for injecting. Thank God, none of these critically ill patients have died so far. After a batch of medicine was finished, the Mage Tower quickly sent a new batch of medicine. This time, the visitors to the temple and the jury hardly missed a step, watching Greet prepare skin test solutions and perform skin tests on patients. The great magician of the protection department even tried it himself. Take a 4.8-gram bottle of penicillin, add 40 ml of normal saline, and shake vigorously to fully dissolve it, while using magic to stir it. Use a 1 ml syringe to draw 0.1 ml and add 0.9 ml of normal saline. Then draw 0.1 ml from it and add 0.9 ml of normal saline. Absorb again, add, absorb, add. Ah, why is it so troublesome? Gretel looked at him with pity and helplessness. Is that what I want? I don't want to either. I didn't do these tasks in my previous life, they were all done by nurses. Only when I started doing them did I realize how troublesome it was. However, the operating procedures in the book were written in detail line by line, and he did not dare to go too far. Maybe the great magician's hands were wet, or maybe he overlooked some steps when shaking it up and absorbing it. In short, after the great magician finished a round of injections and looked back, he saw the fifth patient, and an apprentice shouted in front. Sir, something is wrong with this patient. He doesn't feel well anymore. Gretel's heart tightened, and she ran away following the sound. On the hospital bed, a patient had cyanotic lips, cold sweat all over his body, and was already in a semi-conscious state. Gretel leaned over and felt for his pulse, and felt a thin and rapid pulse under his fingertips. Based on experience, he felt that his blood pressure had dropped sharply. Oops! Allergic to penicillin. This patient was also unlucky. He was allergic to this condition during the skin test stage. Judging from the symptoms, it was the most severe anaphylactic shock. Someone is coming. He threw a healing spell with his backhand. Then, shout loudly. Someone. Rescue. With so many high-level healers around, of course they should call for reinforcements as soon as possible. White light flashes. The great magician of the protection department also had some experience in medical magic, and he also threw in 2 or 3 healing spells. Detoxification, treatment of minor injuries, wonderful rejuvenation. It's not a particularly powerful spell, but it's quite fast and every situation has been considered. However, the patient's vital signs fluctuated up and down, sometimes stronger, sometimes weaker, barely hanging on, and there was no sign that the spell was symptomatic or effective. What's the situation? A group of people rushed in at the door of the ward. Gretel raised his head. That's what I'm talking about. The side effects of this special drug can easily lead to death if it's serious. But didn't you try it with a small dose? Whether you are allergic to this medicine only depends on the individual's physical constitution, not the dosage. Gretel stared at the patient and spoke urgently. It is said that talking about toxicity without dosage is a hoax. However, what is more counterintuitive is that when it comes to penicillin allergy, it really doesn't tell you the dosage. In his many years of clinical practice in his previous life, he had encountered more than one case of shock during the skin test stage. He even heard gossip from colleagues that someone just accompanied a patient to the hospital and went into anaphylactic shock after inhaling penicillin molecules in the air, although he didn't know how he inhaled it. Then how to rescue? The Archbishop of the God of War Temple spoke in a deep voice. Gretel opened his mouth, but didn't know what to say. Inject 0.5 to 1 mg of epinephrine. Add corticosteroids and antihistamines if necessary. Or, go to the mage tower next door to kill a sheep, mash the sheep's adrenal glands, and give it to the patient to swallow? This patient is close to coma, and he can't swallow. His mind was spinning. The purpose of epinephrine is to relieve bronchial smooth muscle spasm, constrict peripheral capillaries, and increase blood pressure. Is there any magic that can shrink blood vessels? He thought and spoke faster and faster. Can it make people breathe smoothly, their heart beat strongly, and their spirits be lifted? Let's not talk about reducing blood vessel permeability, reducing gland secretion, mast cells, eosinophils, etc. for now. Let's pick a few things that the big guys can understand and talk about, and see if they can find a way. Is this all you need? The 2 great magicians and the Archbishop said in unison. The 2 sides looked at each other, and old Sam raised his hand. After you. The Archbishop of the Ares Temple did his part. He clasped his hands on his chest in a standard prayer posture and murmured to himself. After a few words, the voice suddenly became louder. May the God of War bless his people. Grant him the courage and confidence to face powerful enemies. May he not be afraid, flinch, or panic. While praying, his hands were pushed forward, and a red light shone on the patient. Gretel knelt beside the patient and pressed his fingers on his wrist veins. He felt that the pulse under his fingertips was getting stronger and stronger, and the allergic patient's breathing became stronger and stronger. Rescued. Really saved? Inspiration technique behind Gretel. Old Sam's voice was neither high nor low, giving instructions to Gretel. A very useful little magic in the temple of the God of War. The level is not high, and the effect mainly depends on the environment and atmosphere, as well as the popularity of the caster. There are similar spells in magic, and they are only at the 2nd level. If you have time later, you can go to charm control. I'm going to ask for advice. But the patient was already unconscious. Can casting spells like this be useful? So the courage this magical technique injects into the patient's body is just a shot of adrenaline. 3,000 words. Today I completed another 6,000 words, and another 10,000 plus bonus was completed. There's another one tomorrow. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. It's the end of the month, please give me the monthly tickets you saved in your hands quickly. By the way, book your guaranteed monthly pass for next month. The overall incidence of penicillin allergy is 3% to 10%, but the vast majority are type 2 and 3 allergies, which are not serious and will disappear after stopping the drug. The most severe type I, that is, anaphylactic shock, has an incidence rate of 0.41.5/10,000 people taking medication, and a mortality rate of about 0.1/10,000 people. So Greet is willing to make a bet. After all, it only takes a few minutes to die from allergies, but it takes 2 or 3 days for anthrax to develop to toxemia.